Hi, it's Tootie Tagerly, Tuesdays, close to noon Pacific time, coming to you from San Francisco, California. And today, I'm going to talk about leadership, seasons, and rituals. And I think I'm thinking about this because we're approaching the end of the year, the last 6 weeks of the year. There was daylight savings in the United States, I think last weekend, if not the weekend before. And when we think about seasons, what helps us with that is taking a longer term view and helping bring a valuable sense of perspective to our days and weeks, to what seems so urgent, but might not be the most important. And I think why this really matters is to recognize that seasonality exists. Oops, that's my next point. Seasonality exists within your career and life, and to recognize and acknowledge it. And once you know that that's there, then you can choose to use it, to wield it, to have it help make choices for what's best for you, your leadership in career and in life. So, what do I mean by seasonality? Some people think about seasons. There's very much like the season, spring, summer, fall, winter, and all of that. But I'm also talking about periods of time. So many of us in the modern world, with our lights and our working inside, just want to pretend that maybe the seasons don't exist. We can work hard no matter what. We can control it. We can go by our own time and space. But the reality is, we have these periods of time built in, this structure built in for a reason. We are awake in the day, we sleep at night. We work in this modern world mostly 5 days a week, and we have 2 days as a weekend to rest. If you're working in a corporation in certain roles, your work is divided up in by quarters, and you have a sales close at the end of each quarter. Every half year, you might have a performance review, and that's a really big performance review season that comes on and maybe goes off, or that might be annually. A couple of my clients live in an area close to Scandinavia, where we can tell from doing work together year over year that something shifts when it's summer and white night times, and something shifts around now when it gets into a darker period where there is much less light. And then there's the things that mark the year. Um, it's Thanksgiving in the United States next week. It's a seasonality, at least in the northern hemisphere thing, and a period to give thanks and gratitude. And then we're approaching all the various religions or non-religions forms of the holidays towards the end of the year, and then a turnover into the new year, which is the start, a calendar, Gregorian, I think, a calendar that we have put on this, and, really a fake notion of a New Year's Eve. But it's also a time when people make resolutions, when they think about sweeping out the old and bringing in the new through many cultures, from, more Chinese Lunar New Year's to many different parts of it. Um, so we kind of know seasons happen. It's kind of like a duh. That is really, really obvious. But I think the important one is to realize that the seasonality that is in our life also works in our career. I've worked with so many people who groan and dread and just like, oh my gosh, it is performance review time. And this is heavy and crummy because you got all your regular work. And on top of that, you got to write peer reviews. You got to talk to your team. This is the time to talk about weighty things like bonuses and promotions, and really, how are people doing? So the reason why seasonality exists is because there are periods where you just run as fast as possible and you go, 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 go. And then there's periods of rest. There's periods of springtime, growth, renewal, sunshine, and then there's periods that are sleepier where you shed and you hibernate. And I don't believe that many of us in the modern world and technology really believe this in our work. We believe that we can run hard the entire time. So if seasonality exists and we acknowledge it, fighting against the season's nature can really be energy draining. And I did that for decades of my life. I refuse to acknowledge that there were seasons in my work. We just went hard all the time. Maybe, and even when going hard all the time, like running maybe for 3, 4, 5 months towards a big launch, the only seasonality we would think of is like, "Oh my gosh, it's done. We're gonna collapse. We're gonna rest. We're gonna do that maybe for the minimum amount of time for a day or 2 before we get up and do that again." And that can be really, really energy draining. For many years, I worked, in the media space and also in hardware and software in the design studio space. And the hardest thing about that is one of the biggest trade shows of the year, and who knows why they did this, is CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, which happens in early January in Las Vegas. That's great. New year, new time for new devices. Maybe consumers will follow the news. It's a really great news cycle to be like, oh, what's that newest big screen TV or gadget or thing that I must have? But it was terrible for what was normally a slower season in December for the holidays. Because what it meant is that from the design firm side, for us to be ready with the latest concepts, future visualizations, plans for CES, many of us worked hard last minute over the holidays to push for this January bump. And this was when I was in the space of not actually producing real products to be launched to people, but in the space of dreaming up visions of this is what the next connected TV could be. This is a future concept for name your biggest household consumer electronics brands. So I think what I wanted to share with that is that when there is a disconnect between a season and the work that you need to do there, that can really, really be energy draining. And that might be why it feels hard. Or it might be because you've been in one season of go, 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 go for too long. Or maybe you've been in a season of boredom for too long. You've been working at your job and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not learning anymore. There's not more. I don't believe in the company's mission and values. Every month or every summer, I should feel rejuvenated, but I don't. I'm just waiting till my next vacation. And that's because fighting against the season's nature can be energy draining. So, from this doom and gloom, what do you do about it? For me, the solution is rituals. You celebrate it with rituals. This is what Thanksgiving is next week. A ritual saying, oh my gosh, we run in our modern life too much. Let's gather together over food with friends and family and simply be grateful for the comforts of each other. Once a year or twice a year, we are going to stop and acknowledge that, hey, everybody works so hard, and this is time to lay back, assess, and see, hey, how have we been doing? How do we get that feedback and learn how to be better? How do we figure out where we want to grow? What other people think of us? If you switch that into a ritual like that for yourself, a performance review is a chance to get feedback and assess and kind of step out of the daily to do lists, OKRs, launches, and just assess. Maybe that shifts it a little bit. Maybe it becomes a ritual, something to be celebrated that you can actually do a self review. Do a self review twice a year or once a year, whatever your company does. And then some of my favorite rituals, which I've talked about a lot and which many high performing teams do, is what is a weekly gratitude ritual? If you have a team meeting once a week, how do you get perspective and stick your head up above the day to day noise, every day's noise and deadlines and urgent stuff, and actually just say, hey, what are we thankful this week for this week? What do we want to celebrate? Who do we want to acknowledge? And just reminding ourselves of how far that we have come. These are the rituals. And sometimes it can seem silly. Who really cares back in the days when we were gathering in the office that today we are celebrating the October birthdays and, we're going to pile all the people together. And for me, that might not be, or for you, for me, that might not be a ritual that has value and impact. Part of it is deciding what rituals matter to you and to your team and what feels like celebration for them. At Facebook, we used to have tons of offsites. They would be great when you go do things with teams, But when you did too many of them, it just felt like a bore, a chore, other times away from work. So find the right rituals for your teams. And that's actually the fourth point, which I should have brought up sooner, which is experiment with them. If you recognize that there's seasons, figure out which seasons matter the most to you in your work. Is it performance reviews? Is it, I was recently talking to a client who's like, yeah, every 7 years I have an itch. You know, her season is I jump in, I work at a job, I create my credibility and influence. And, maybe about year 6 or maybe year 5, I start to explore and see what else is out there. For her, that's her 7-year season. And it helps give perspective to know where she is within those 7 years. For other people, for me, young, entitled, kid with a Stanford degree thinking that I could do anything, there was a time where I jumped jobs every 9 to 12 months. I look back at it now and I'm like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? I could never really grow and learn and build anything sustainable. But those were my seasons there, every 9 to 12 months. And there's a different part of that. So the first thing, recognize what your seasons are that you're in right now and experiment. Do you want them to be longer? Do you want them to be shorter? And what rituals you want to establish and celebrate within them. All right, that's it for today. Oh, I usually go back, don't I? This talk was about leadership, seasons, and rituals. And what's important is understand that the seasonality that's in your life also exists within your careers. Fighting against the nature of these seasons, whether it's a darker, restful time or an energetic go, go, go time, can be really energy draining. How you work with these seasons is you call out the seasons and you celebrate them with rituals. You celebrate them with rituals to really say, this is the end of my year. This is what I want to do next with it. And then experiment with them to see what they mean to you. Yeah. So one experiment that I've run for many years of my life is that I have hated the notion of New Year's resolutions. It's a thing that I'm like, it's a new year, 2022. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to be different about the next year. Um, and what I started doing maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, and then started teaching as well, is to essentially set your intention and your North Star for the year. And what I have is a program for it. I've taught it for once now, last January, and it really helps attendees figure out what is the intention word that I want for my 2022. And from that, how do I set a roadmap for everything that I'm going to accomplish towards around 2022? It's a ritual, it's a celebration around the turning of the year, and then it helps become a guidepost for what matters through the year. That's a ritual that I do for myself and have done with some clients. That's it. See you next week. Next week, am I working? Yes. See you next Tuesday for a broadcast. Have an awesome day. Bye.